Were you there?
No, on Friday I was flying.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we had a discussion on wallets. We got Ovidio up to speed basically on
Okay.
the last day's worth of stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, he was gonna think over it over the weekend. So I guess
so we'll talk
see
to him
what he says.
At stand up. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Indeed.
Cool. Awesome. That'll be good. That'll be good. I wanted to spend a little bit more time while I was flying sketching out the proof sketch for liveness using the techniques from the error correcting codes, but I'm still a little bit behind. I was just finally collapsed after 6 days of 2 hours of sleep at night. Just could not stay awake on the plane. But I am working on it. Who else has joined us?
Hey guys, it's Aditya.
Hey guys.
Hey.
I guess Vlad and Aditya joined. Meta is here too.
So, any updates?
I'm not sure what I've missed in the last couple of weeks. Aditya, have you been on the stand-up?
I'm sorry, I haven't been on the stand-up.
No worries. I was thinking maybe we'd update everyone on our work on liveness.
Sure, yeah. So Nate has been working on extending Vlad's previous liveness strategy, but there's still parts of the proof that we have to work on, and and I've been working on another independent liveness strategy, which basically it's not practical, but well, we have a proof for one CBC protocol that's live, but it's not practical at all. It involves, I guess, n-squared messages between participants for each round. And Nate's working on something that's much more practical than this.
Cool. And the reason why it's n-squared is because of the reliable broadcast protocol, right?
Yep, we use reliable broadcast protocol. You basically just pick it up. Sorry?
I said, do you want to give an outline of the strategy and the proof?
Yeah, sure. So basically what we do is we convert equivocation faults and faults in which you're sending two different messages to participants into crash faults. And the way we do it is we force each validator to either send the same message to all participants in each round or none at all. And we do that by having everyone communicate to everyone about what they received from each respective validator.
Can you tell us a little more in detail?
Yeah, just a sec. I'm finding a quiet spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so what we do is basically, so let's say, so first of all, we do assume signatures, so we do assume cryptography. And what we do is each participant tells the entire network what message they received from each other validator. And basically, I basically just adopted whatever was there from traditional DFT literature and used it as such. And it gives the guarantee that at each round, each validator, all the set of honest validators receives the same set of messages from all other validators. I mean, I haven't gotten into the details of the broadcast protocol. I just adopted it from the earlier literature.
Is this along the same lines as the gossip about gossip thing from Hashgraph, telling other validators what you heard and from whom?
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds similar, but I'm not familiar with the Hashgraph protocol.
Dahlia said that they effectively implement a reliable broadcast protocol. So I would guess it's the same.
Cool. So one of the drawbacks with this is that we can tolerate just up to 1/3 faulty validators each round, which kind of, is different from what I guess Vlad wants, where each validator should be able to set its own fault tolerance threshold. So this just caps it at 1/3.
Yeah, that and the fact that it doesn't have theoretically optimal network overhead.
So the other one that Nate's working on basically goes like in each round, validators are sending messages. And if you receive a message from some other validator, which does not include all the previous messages that you have sent to that validator, then you basically ignore the other guy.
So is this? So you're saying that if you see an equivocation, you immediately ignore the validator that equivocated?
Sorry, in Nate's strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and if you send a message to some other validator, but it refuses to, add it to its protocol state and generate a message from that protocol state and send it back to you, you start ignoring them. Not just equivocations, even these kind of faults, where the other validator refuses to receive your message.
Okay, so there's some tight synchrony constraints that within what time they have a certain amount of time to respond, and if they don't respond, then you start ignoring them from then on.
Well, I guess not exactly. It just says the next time you receive a message in some future round, if that message from that validator doesn't contain the messages that you had sent before, then you start ignoring them. But yeah, I guess it does have synchrony constraints because there is a concept of rounds.
Right, got it. And it's assumed then that all messages sent during a round are delivered in the same
Yes,
round.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
At least if they're sent and received, so sent or received by, I guess just received by a non-faulty validator.
Yeah, exactly. Received by non-faulty. Yeah.
Yeah, but the real trick is the fact that you've imposed the rounds.
Yeah, the rounds thing is definitely where the whole thing comes from, and it's definitely not the most elegant thing in the world. But we did kind of want to have just a quick liveness proof, based on a very kind of more traditional approach.
Well, anyway,
I guess it's fine. It's fine even if we have rounds because basically we have safety under asynchrony, but then liveness only under synchrony, which is fine.
No, understood. But what would be better is if you had a way of expressing synchrony constraints rather than just say it's. I mean, what you want is a language for synchrony constraints. You can explore different synchrony strategies, and you want to be able to do it without wall clock time, because wall clock time is way too expensive. both in terms of trust and in terms of the total amount of labor to lay it into place.
And in terms of the, specification complexity.
Well, that's what I meant, labor.
Oh, I think you meant labor in terms of like just making sure that that you have to. Yeah, I mean somehow like with the implementation.
No, I literally mean the specification complexity. It's just it'll be through the roof, because if you want to handle anything like that involves communication from satellites above the Earth to the ground, your specification is going to get really wonky.
So Aditya, what's the strategy after the reliable broadcast part?
Oh, so in my protocol, in my strategy, it's you do a reliable broadcast, and then whatever you have received from each round from the reliable broadcast, you add it to your protocol state, generate a message, and continue to the next round. So basically, send message, then receive all the messages that you get from the reliable broadcast, add it to your protocol state, start ignoring validators that have equivocated or are otherwise faulty, and then generate a message from the new protocol state and proceed to the next round. And for binary consensus, this basically gives you safety on a consensus value in 3 rounds.
You mean liveness?
No, I mean you get to a decided state, which means that you're live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember, you gotta try to change your language from saying like, oh, you get to a safe state to a decided one. From a block being safe to a block being decided, because it's kind of using the word safe is confusing because of the context with the safety group.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's something that's going to take us self-discipline for months before we really change that language, because we were using it for a long time. So basically, the protocol is basically just to do rounds of communication.
Yeah.
Yep. And then in the 3rd round, you basically get to a state where you observe 2 rounds of messages, which from at least all the honest validators that propose the same estimate. And in the 2nd round, you see each honest validator acknowledging the previous message with the same estimate from all other validators, from all other honest validators at least.
Meaning the ones that didn't crash or didn't send equivocations.
Exactly.
So
and fail to receive messages from other honest validators, even that.
So Aditya, you might find the paper that I posted in the chat of interest.
Yep, I see it. I'll go through it and get back to you.
Yeah. So the point of that paper is it gives us a language for synchrony constraints, rather than just a one-off. We don't rather than insisting on one strategy, which is rounds or round robin or anything like that. There's a more general framework for expressing the constraints, and there's basically one property, and they are able to disambiguate Byzantine faults from crash faults.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So I was basically following the strategy of Braca, which is basically the reliable broadcasting, which is convert every other type of fault into a crash fault.
Yeah, I understand.
Are you optimistic, Aditya, that we can have the same kind of protocol with better overhead by doing some pipelining?
Nate's strategy looks pretty promising, but there's like major parts of the proof missing. But I'm optimistic about it.
Could you describe it?
Yeah. So the outline would be in each round, first produce a message from your protocol state, send it to other validators. Next step is you receive messages that other validators have sent. And if in their sent messages, you don't observe a message for each validator that you received a message from, if in its justification, you don't observe a message that you had sent them before, you start ignoring them. You mark them as faulty and you start ignoring them.
Again, it's the trick of converting the errors that are detectable via justifications into crash faults.
Yes. But notably, this doesn't prevent nodes from equivocating. So they could send two different messages to two different validators.
So you still have both Byzantine and crash faults. It's just a
Yeah,
way of
but-
recognizing crash faults.
But the equivocation faults are something that we could deal with in a very similar way because they're actually an easier way because it's easier to detect equivocation faults. If you receive equivocations.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at the error correcting framework, you don't have to unify or keep Byzantine and crash faults into the same category. They can be held separate.
Yeah, of course. And I wouldn't say that the reliable broadcasting puts them in the same category. It just makes it so that so that everyone identifies all the nodes that either equivocated or failed to send messages as basically faulty and doesn't include their messages, or it doesn't it basically makes it seem like they're not sending messages.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, Vijay?
Yep, that's pretty much.
Cool. Anything else?
I also spent some time last week working on an efficient fork choice rule that Vitalik proposed. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, but it basically does latest message driven ghost in V times log D, where D is the depth of the blocks and V is the size of the validator set.
Cool. That sounds interesting.
Sorry, you broke up for me. What was that? What did you say the efficiency was?
Oh, so Vitalik proposed a new fork choice rule that does latest message driven ghost in a much more efficient way.
Are you talking about the binary one? I thought you might have said the efficiency.
Yep, the binary one. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So if I understand kind of correctly, it uses this notion of virtual blocks and sets up a fork choice rule where at every height there's at most two choices.
Yep, that's right.
Or at every kind of quote virtual height, because there's at least two choices, or there's at most two choices.
At most two choices. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can figure out the choice from like some kind of bit matrix. How does that work?
So you basically, let's just assume you happen to have a binary structure for the block tree, and each block has at most two children. So what you do is you keep stepping down into keep stepping down till you find that at least half the people, at least half the validator set isn't agreeing. And then basically at the maximum height that at least half the validator set agrees, step to that point, then execute ghost there, and then repeat. So basically what you would do is, you have the entire validator set with weight 1, step down to at least half of them are agreeing. At that point, make a choice wherever the maximum is, and then set your validator set size to whatever the maximum was there and start again. Sorry, I'm explaining it in a confusing way. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm confused. Do you want to try again?
So the gist would be, if you have a binary tree of blocks, then you can basically execute ghost on a block in log time, log of the height of the tree.
How do you efficiently tell from like a validator's latest block which of the two branches of a particular fork they're on?
That was exactly the question I had.
So what you basically do is store some extra things in the state that tell you how many people are agreeing, that how many validators are agreeing up till that height.
Or the total weight of the validators agreeing up to that height. So
Yep.
in every block, you store this number for every height. Sorry, I'm not quite following.
No, you store information that that lets you compute how many validators agree up to that height. Hold on, I'm searching for the blog post. I'll just send that on the chat.
Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, Vitalik has been quite concerned about the efficiency of this fork choice rule, and now seems to be much more comfortable, which is great.
So Vlad, you guys mentioned a while ago that you were working on refining the proof of the clique safety oracle, and there was a small issue with the way it was originally presented, in that having 2 levels deep of agreement wasn't always enough, and to get more, you needed more levels of agreement, and there was some formula that related to do the depth versus the safety.
Yeah, that's right. The issue was because of the fact that validators could see different validators equivocating and not really agree about who the equivocators are. And basically, we have like a new proof, and the clique depth like increases the fault tolerance that you can get for a particular clique size. And Nate has a draft proof of the new clique in a branch of the CBC Casper paper, in the CBC Casper GitHub organization. And I'd suggest looking at that, because it's probably the most up-to-date thing. I don't think it's complete yet, but I think that the thrust of it is done. I'm gonna spend some time next few weeks, hopefully, completely fleshing that out.
Okay, cool.
Do you have, do you have any? Sorry, do you have any thoughts on the safety oracle thing? Oh, sorry, the decision oracle. Oh, it's the decision oracle. Oh, great. Thank you for the link. Call it decision oracle.
I haven't gone through it. I haven't gone through it yet, to be honest. So I couldn't comment yet.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for the links. Yeah, that's great.
Michael, you had wanted to ask Vlad about sharding.
I did, yes. I've wanted to do that for a little while. So I think just copy this. I've written up a short Google Doc that just had some questions that I had when I was reading through sharding stuff originally. But the upshot of it was I was wondering if you have atomicity between a parent shard and a child shard, and the parent shard is corrupt, does that mean that the parent can also corrupt the child with a single validator?
I don't know what you mean by corrupt. So this is a good question.
So say there's a cartel in the parent shard that is, forcing the fork choice rule to follow particular directions. Say, maybe they're censoring things or preventing certain types of transactions from being finalized, whatever. They have some agenda and they have a majority stake such that they can enforce said agenda.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, assuming that all the blocks are valid, the worst they could do is orphan child blocks and prevent child blocks from being finalized. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. Is like basically the main concern that I had was having a majority control over the parent automatically gives you control over the children in the sense of being able to orphan blocks, etc. Without having a majority in those shards as well. So yeah,
that's right.
Okay. Which, I mean, like you say, is not necessarily as big a deal, but it does, I feel like it undermines at least a little bit the censorship resistance of, the platform, right?
Oh, well, I feel like there's kind of a few ways in which we can and do work around this. One of them is with shard rotation, so that there's no shard that's actually permanently in the root position, and so the amount of power that any shard has is limited. And another is the idea that if we are going to have a root shard, then maybe it should have more validators, more stake than its children. One of the models is that all its validators are on the root, and then you have half in each of its children's in the binary tree, and half in each of their children. And so in this model, you have maximum censorship resistance in the root, which means that it's going to be really hard for the root to manipulate the children.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then that actually sort of leads me nicely into the next question, which was about sort of on a practical level, how this works out. So the idea, I assume, of when you're talking about this sort of sharding is getting the scaling, right? You want to be able to somehow divide up the network in such a way that not everyone is doing all of the work all the time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I would put it like this, so that a node who's concerned about a decision on a particular shard doesn't need to have all the information required to make decisions on other shards. Or, for another way, two nodes that are concerned with very different decisions can receive sets of messages that pertain to those decisions without having to receive all the messages that each other have received. So actually, here, let me put it another way, which is actually closer to my current spec, which is that if you're interested in a particular decision, you find out what validators at what heights have weight in that decision, and then you download the messages from those validators at those heights, so that you can make that decision. But that set of validators that you're interested in for those heights isn't going to be the same as the set of validators that I might be interested in for another decision. And so because we're paying attention to different validator sets, we can receive different sets of messages, and the validators can make different decisions. Different clients can make different decisions without ever having to receive all the messages from all the validators.
Interesting. Okay, this is an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah, it's probably the clearest out of the above.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's very clear, and not actually what I was thinking when I was imagining this question. So, because what I was thinking is that like somehow the validators basically need to either trust that other shards are doing the right thing, or they need to validate what's going on in the other shards themselves. But what you're saying is that's fine. Validators, we're not worried about validators. We're worried about clients interacting with the chain.
Yeah, although validators are also going to be in a similar position where like you only need to make blocks and on a particular shard, like you're not going to need to know about all the things that all the validators are doing in all the other shards.
Well, that's the principle, but the point is what happens if they're lying, if you encounter a group that's lying.
You can't so lying about what? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, say they let a double spend get by. The same tokens get used in two different places.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand what that means. So are you talking about an invalid block, or are you talking about block reversion?
No, it's not an invalid block. It's just that or the entire group agrees to let by a double spend. Like from their point of view.
I don't know what that means.
Well, let's split it up into two cases. So let's suppose that they've created a block that is invalid. Like if you had run the VM correctly, it would have encountered an error. But everyone in that shard has agreed to just ignore that error and finalize the block anyways.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, so there's no way in which it's kind of the way that I would say it is like that block is final only for light nodes that aren't validating, and light nodes that are validating will orphan it and won't finalize it. So it'll all.
Wait, what? You dropped out, Vlad. I didn't hear you.
I think there's a connectivity problem.
There's
a connectivity problem here.
So do you guys? Does that make sense?
No,
you dropped out there, Vlad. Could you repeat?
Oh, sorry. Where did I drop out?
At the beginning.
At the beginning. Oh, geez. I was saying that their blocks aren't going to be final because they're invalid for any nodes that are validating. So, like, if I'm a node that's running on the shard, and like they make produces a invalid block, like that invalid block will like never be in my fork trace. It's only for light nodes that aren't the ones that aren't validating blocks, for which they will be final and in the consensus. And so,
so in this model, everybody has to validate all blocks.
No, of course not. No. You only validate the blocks on the shards that you're looking at, or the blocks that have weight in the decision that you're interested in.
But there's some kind of closure property here, right? Like if I'm interested in a shard who does business with a shard that is engaging in this kind of invalid block behavior, right.
Yeah, sure. So what can happen is there's an invalid block in some other shard, and it has a run-on consequence on this shard. But basically, what that means is that like there's another invalid block, or there's a basically block on a, say, let's just use an example of like one shard, two child shards, and one of those children there's an invalid block, and then on the parent, the parent somehow pretends that block isn't invalid, and then like transacts with the other child. Yeah, so like, you know, the approach here with the non-finality of invalid blocks is that, like, you know, actually like what's going to need to happen is like there's going to be a really deep reorg as the child shard abandons that block, as the parent shard abandons that block.
So you're saying that some external observer can see, oh wait, this block is invalid, but the parent already included it, and that external observer can somehow go in and try to like correct the problem and have that ripple out across the whole network?
The way that I'd say it is like any node that's fully validating will just be executing the fork choice in this way. I'm not sure exactly like if I want to like give a protocol for like raising people's attention to invalid blocks, as opposed to just creating a protocol for guaranteeing the validity of blocks and fault tolerance and with economic certainty. But definitely, I would say that, like, you know, our sharding research has been mostly focused on the context where we have valid blocks. Vitalik sharding research is focused a lot more on these kinds of challenge response protocols and making sure that when there is invalid blocks that they get discovered.
I see. Okay. So would it be accurate to say that a protocol following node is validating all blocks?
No, definitely not.
Or let me rephrase. Would it be accurate to say that a protocol following node is validating all necessary blocks, including closures?
Yeah.
No. So I mean, I would say that's not that's definitely not the way that this is set up. You know, they only validate the blocks that are relevant to their decision, assuming that blocks that don't have weight in their decision are valid. Or maybe not, maybe rather than assuming, you know, having a fault tolerant guarantee that they're not valid, that they are valid. Because obviously, if you had to validate every block, it wouldn't be scalable. The whole point here is that, like, we're not all validating all the blocks.
Yeah. Okay. So in the case that an invalid block is committed elsewhere because the fault tolerance that you had set for yourself was breached, you wouldn't notice that it happened, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't. Not naturally. Not like, you know.
Basically,
without a protocol.
Yeah, what we're saying is with this protocol, either you don't see the fault or you validate all blocks with respect to a closure. It's one or the other.
Well, I mean, it's a little more complicated than that because, I mean, you as a single node, yeah, but you're not the only node in the system. And the point of sharding really is that, like, different nodes validate different parts. And so one way to consider is that, you know, for one node, yeah, but if you were to run the right number of nodes, then you could validate everything and you would see it all.
No, the problem is if there's a colluding group of nodes that, you know, they're corrupt, and then either parties are going to have to go back and validate the blocks they validated, or they're going to have to trust those blocks.
But I think Vlad's suggestion just now was that a single entity, like single logical entity, could run multiple nodes in multiple places and like have that trust relationship established. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean that was like an example, but you know, I don't know if that's like the way that I recommend that people run the protocol necessarily. You know, it's definitely possible to do that.
But again, kind of the point is that now that single logical entity represents a kind of interconnection between multiple different shards.
I mean, I think of it as like a distributed node.
I understand. So
really,
they're not exactly sharded.
Well, no, I mean,
they're kind of entangled.
I mean, the shards are absolutely entangled.
Yeah.
Because like they can talk to each other, but there's only like certain ways that they could do it, and there's only certain. So let me put it this way: validity has this closure property that you're concerned about, but the fork choice rule doesn't. And like the work in sharding consensus protocols actually is not work in validation or data availability. Like those are not consensus protocol problems. Those are problems that are to be taken care of with other distributed system solutions. They have nothing to do with consensus.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the simplest way is if you can have some kind of property on the validity of the computation, right?
Yeah. So one of the ambitions that we have is to have zero knowledge proofs of the validity of the blocks in the blocks. It's recursive zero knowledge proofs.
Yeah, or something. Zero knowledge proofs is one approach, or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would be ideal, but definitely, that is like, validation research, not fork choice rule research. It's not research about the consensus protocol.
I understand how you're dividing the I understand how you're dividing the problem up. That makes sense to me.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Lad, for.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we were only worried about invalid blocks there. Is that right?
I think the invalid block example is like the primary one, and so talking about that one is sufficient. You could probably cast other examples onto invalid blocks.
No. Well, my claim is that like, the way that the sharding protocol works is like, if you assume that the blocks are valid, you don't have this kind of closure issue around the consensus formation.
Sure,
and
but
so,
the point is that assuming that they're valid is equivalent to having a trust relationship between the shards, right?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Depends on how the assumption is warranted.
That's an interesting question, Michael. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'm not sure if they're equivalent, but it seems like that's a reasonable assertion on the face of it.
Yeah, I suppose we'd have to formalize each of the terms before we.
Sorry. What's a reasonable assertion, Greg?
Well, I mean, the idea that Michael's put forward is that that there's a correlation between the trust between different shards and block validity. So if you can assume that all the blocks you get out of a shard are going to be valid, then that's equivalent to a certain kind of trust.
Sure.
And actually, just to tie this back to the first question about a parent hijacking the fork choice rule of a child, if the parent cartel puts a single validator into the child who's then creating invalid blocks, but confirming them with the parent to hijack that fork choice rule, it forces, I guess in some ways, the honest nodes in the child shard to start recognizing those, or do they, because they're honest, see that those blocks are invalid and just and it breaks the atomicity in that sense? Or is that, again, I guess this is sort of out of your scope because you said you weren't worried about invalid blocks anyways, but.
Well, it's not that I'm not worried about them. It's just that I'm worried about them at a different layer than the consensus layer.
Okay.
Yeah, understood.
But generally, I mean, and the setup is that like the setup that I'm imagining most of the time is that when you're producing a block on a parent shard that is receiving messages from the child shard, that you know that the blocks in the child that are sending you the messages are valid. So, and this kind of works super well in the paradigm that we talked about earlier, where you have like the union of the children's validators and the parent, because the validators that are producing those blocks actually are going to be validators on those children blocks.
Right, right.
But I don't know if that's necessary. I'm totally comfortable exploring other validator assignments and ways to make sure that the blocks are valid.
This is quite interesting, though. I was unaware. Apparently, there is a zero knowledge. Hang on a second. So apparently, the zero knowledge protocols that is fully encodable within the applied pi calculus. So apparently, and it's suitable for automation in ProVerif, and the encoding is sound and fully automated. And apparently, it's already been applied to the direct anonymous attestation protocol and discovered a novel attack that was overlooked. So that's quite interesting. So it might be possible to go after. It depends on the level of granularity of this analysis, but it might be possible to go after verified row calc, row computation solution inside the block, so you don't have to trust. You don't have to trust from shard to shard. I'll send a link.
Sounds good. Cool. That's interesting.
Vlad, are you around in a couple of hours?
I wouldn't count on it because I'm in Berlin for an event, and I'm probably, I have a lot of people who want my time in a couple hours. However, I'm maybe in like 7 or 8 hours.
Okay, you won't be crashed by then.
Well, no, I'm jet lagged.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. Well,
let's do the trial and error protocol, where you message me on Telegram and I'll message you back.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna hop off.
Yeah, I'm happy to yield the rest of the time if no one else has any questions or updates.
Yeah, nope, I'm good. Thanks, guys. This was a good discussion.
Yep, indeed. Ciao for now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone.